Good morning, everybody. Hope you are all doing really well on this day, the Wednesday, the 8th of April. Um, I have my cup of tea, and I also I have a confession to share with you guys. And my confession, it's good for the soul, is that I have a problem getting distracted by YouTube. I have a problem getting distracted by YouTube. Because when I'm working, I like to put on kind of background music, something instrumental, quite chill, just to work along to help me focus. But the kind of the irony is that it does the opposite, because I use YouTube to play some of that stuff, and as soon as I'm on there, I am in trouble because I find myself getting pulled into watching old football highlights, Russian Orthodox chanting. But at the moment, in this particular season, it always seems to come back around to watching videos of arm wrestling. I have no idea why. Maybe some of you can comment about that. But my confession is I get distracted when I want to be doing something else, and this shouldn't really come as any surprise because we live in an age of distraction, and that is something of an understatement, because we have kind of powerful multi-billion-dollar industries just kind of spending unconscionable amounts of money, trying to figure out how to grab and how to retain your attention. Advertising theory in itself is kind of the business of buying and selling human attention. We are exposed, I think, to over 3,000 adverts every single day, that we're checking our phones 150 times a day, but that we actually pick up and handle our phones more than over 2,500 times a day. We live in an age where Kim Kardashian gets paid more for a public appearance than Nobel Prize winners, and this is challenging, to say the least. And kind of the more and the more information that is available, the more and more advertisers have to kind of stand out from each other. They have to compete with each other. They have to try and rise above all the clamour and the noise to get our attention, and this leads to kind of more and more extreme ways of drawing us in, feeding our interests. So these kind of incredibly complex algorithms that they set up, so I end up with videos of arm wrestling on my Facebook or on my Twitter feed or on my wherever it is. They're trying to figure out what's he interested in, how can we get him, all these kind of clickbait titles that lead nowhere. And so we live in a time where our attention, our focus has become a resource in itself. It's become a commodity that people buy and sell, as it were. And this, I've heard it referred to in rather disturbing terms as attention harvesting. Companies, organizations looking to harvest and capture our attention. And there's a guy named James Williams, who is an ex-techie from Google, and he's turned into something of a Silicon Valley philosopher, and he says that the liberation of human attention may be the defining moral and political struggle of our time. The liberation of human of human attention may be the defining moral and political struggle of our time. And that might be a bit of hyperbole, a bit of an overstatement, but there's certainly something true about that everything and everyone seems to be pulling our attention all the time, from the moment we get up in the morning to the moment we go to bed. We are potentially exposed to all this stuff, and this is important because time is a gift to us, but it's not unlimited. It's a resource that we have, that we are called to steward before God. And how we use our time is often bound up with how and where we put our attention. Where will we choose to invest the resource that is our time and attention? And again, if you pull that thread a little further, our attention is bound up with oftentimes our desires and our loves. So someone said, if you want to identify the objects of your love, ask yourself, who or what receives the most of my attention? Christian philosopher James K.A. Smith says that we are what we love, and our lives are shaped and primed and aimed by our everyday habits and practices. That we are what we love, and our love is kind of formed and it's shaped by the small things and habits and practices that we do every day. And he says that we may think they are, but these practices are not neutral, they're not benign, but they are designed, they're intentionally loaded to form us in a certain type of way, to certain type of people with certain type of desires, certain type of allegiances and loyalties and loves. We've been talking a lot about kind of being holy partners in the heavenly calling, about being restored back to the image of Christ. And a guy named M.R. Mulholland Jr. says that we are all in a process of spiritual formation. We are all being shaped into either towards the image of Christ or away from it, in a kind of what he describes as a horribly destructive caricature of that image. And so how we spend our time, where we focus our attention, matters, because it's consuming the resource that we have of our time, and it's forming us into certain types of people. And at this strange, this challenging time, not all of us, but some of us find ourselves with more time on hands than normal. And so the question becomes kind of, how will we use this time? And so my thought today is, I want to just kind of throw out a soft challenge there to kind of begin to think about how you might begin to use your time well. But are there certain habits, certain practices that you do every day that you want to say, actually, I spend a bit too much time on those things. I could spend a little less time on that. And maybe I could spend a bit more time doing these types of things. And so maybe just on a bit of paper or something, one half you could say things I want to do less of. On the other half, you could put down things that I want to do more of. And I've read a bunch of articles in the midst of this lockdown, and one of the kind of the repeated things that experts seem to be saying is that an important way of coping well in kind of a lockdown situation, I think in life generally, but certainly in lockdown, is by putting structures in place, ordering your day around these things, so being more intentional about how you spend your time. And so maybe I would encourage you just to start small. Maybe start by beginning to read the Bible for a few minutes every day, spending a few minutes, a few bit of time in prayer every day. Or maybe it's when you go for your walk, when you're out in nature, when you get to see the sun for that sort of window of time. Maybe just look to try and find God the Creator as you go for your walk. And there are kind of any number of kind of habits and practices that you could try and pick up, try and grow in at this time. And I want to encourage you to do this, because one of the things that you'll find is that the more you do them, the more you'll find that your heart and your desires are slowly changed. And oftentimes what began as a discipline actually ends up becoming a delight. What began as a discipline ends up becoming a delight, because as you've begun to practice these things, these habits, they are beginning to shape and to form your love and your desires. And so you learn to love Scripture, you learn to love the place of prayer, you learn to love discovering the presence of God in the mundane and the everyday. So I will leave it there, but I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love you to leave some comments, maybe in this Facebook post below, and just share some of the things that you want to maybe, on the one hand, lay down at this time, and maybe some of the things that you want to pick up, some of the things that you want to grow in at this time as well. So for me, I am going to try and not get distracted so much on YouTube and focus more on what I should be doing. So I look forward to hearing from you, and again, we'd love to hear it. So leave some comments, and have a great day.